What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Johanna Garton talking about her book All in Stride, A Journey of Running, Courage, and the Search for the American Dream. You can pick that up right now. It's available. This was a really cool conversation with Joanna. The book is sports journalism based and about runners from Kenya. And so I was part of the running community for a hot second. And so it was really cool to be able to talk to her about her experiences and just kind of share, sentiments about running, the love-hate relationship that it can be. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Joanna.
Okay. All right. Today we've got Johanna Garton. We're talking about All in Stride, a journey in running, courage, and the search for the American dream. That book is available now. Joanna, thanks for joining me today. I think I mentioned in my review, it was like a little pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to get so engaged because I think with some nonfiction stories, it can be tricky to keep the reader engaged. But I really enjoyed what you did. I could tell your skill, what you put into practice, and we're able to bring this project to life. I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Yay, I'm so happy to be here. And yes, I totally love reading nonfiction that sounds like fiction. That's how I love to read books. So I'm glad you got sucked into it, even though it's nonfiction.
Yeah, I could tell that's an interesting tidbit there because I felt like there were some points where I could tell you tried to make it a little bit go with more creative about it instead
Mhm.
of fully informational. You did try to like
Yeah,
using quotes and stuff and really trying to tap into the mindset of the athletes that are like the focus of your book. I could tell that you really did try to make that connection. And I think that was so
great,
important to making it like
great.
I said, read not like a nonfiction. So
Sure, sure,
it was
sure.
helpful, definitely. So to get started, can you give like a summary of the book so listeners can follow along if they haven't read it yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is the story of Shadrach Kipchirchir and his wife, Elvin Kebet. They were born in small, remote villages in Kenya, and they came to the United States on distance running scholarship. So the first part of the book takes place in Kenya and is their lives in these villages and what that looked like. And then their journey to the United States, where they competed in college at the D1 level. And they met in college in the United States. They fell in love and got married. And then they both eventually joined the US Army and were sent into a program that trains distance runners to be Olympic athletes. And so it's the story of their journey to the United States, their life in college, becoming US citizens through becoming soldiers, essentially, and then what it's like for them to continue this journey as soldiers and also as professional distance runners, which is what they are both still doing today.
Yeah, that's wild because you met them how long ago, or how long ago did you? I don't know because I don't want to say if you could walk us through like your process of like when you
Yeah.
met them, and I imagine you still maintain relationships with them
Yeah.
today, like however long,
Yeah.
and you got really immersed, like they really opened their homes to you for real.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
imagine that was really fascinating and heartwarming and all that. So I want to walk me through your process. I want to explore like how that whole experience was for you.
Yeah. Oh, that part is so fascinating. So I am a distance runner myself, and I live in Denver, Colorado, and they are based in Colorado Springs. So when I had finished my last book, I was looking for a new project, and I'm, as I said, a runner. So I was interested in maybe doing a running narrative. I focus primarily on female athletes, essentially. And somebody told me about this program that's part of the US Army that trains these athletes to do Olympic level competitions. And I had never heard of this program. So I was very interested in this program and went to Colorado Springs to watch one of the distance runner workouts. And that was where I happened to meet Shadrach Kipchirchir for the first time and hear about his journey growing up in Kenya. And now he's an American and what that experience was like. And he started telling me about his life and his story. He was injured at the time, so he was just sitting in the bleachers as I was, just watching the workout. And by the end of that hour with him, I realized, oh my gosh, there's actually so much more here that I could write about. It's a very personal story. And he told me he was married to another athlete, a woman, Elvin Kebet, on the team. And then there was this love story that was part of it. So it became very clear very quickly that this is where the book was going to go.
Uh, yeah, I can't, because I didn't know that about the US Army either, like offering those types of programs where luckily for people like in their situation, they could find a way to serve their country, keep their performance levels higher, keep working towards any other those performance goals, and keep them in shape and keep them also out of trouble. So could be like because they're foreign born, they want to
Mhm.
be doing everything right and not ruffle any feathers, and just also just keep working to their own earning their own little spot here in this country and
Right,
all
right.
they've done. And they were successful in the US Army too. Like they kept getting bumped up at some points. I thought that's so they just like really gave insight into their personalities in general and how that just an exceptional drive and determination transfers into like different aspects of their life. It's other like top runners and like top performers and who are always like pushing themselves forward. Like, why would that stop at their army rank? Why would that? How could that not? How could they not like rise to a challenge into another part of their lives? Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. I think the book really speaks to this question of what does it mean to be an American? They came over here, and not only did they go through an American collegiate experience, but then they both felt so strongly about everything the United States had given them that they decided to make this ultimate sacrifice and join the military, which how many of us born and raised here in the United States make that choice? I
Oh,
certainly didn't.
no.
So yeah, so they did. And so they are true patriots and really did join the army mostly because they wanted to give back to their country. And then when they found they could also continue running, it was a real kind of 2-for-1 situation for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's like almost perfect for them,
Hmm.
definitely. Because
Yeah.
yeah, and that is really, it's like actions, and because I can't imagine at least like, just the kind of impression that I got while I was reading is they didn't like they only knew that they wanted to keep running, and they only knew that they wanted to utilize that drive and give back to the country that has been able to help them live out their aspirations, and
Hmm.
at least in a competitive way. 'Cause I know, I guess I didn't know the depths of like how strong and how huge the running community in Kenya is. I guess
Hmm.
it makes sense now, like now that I put two and two together. I've done the Chicago Marathon twice, and I don't think I will ever do another marathon. Yeah, it was just such a huge commitment, and I was just doing it like no, 'cause I just want to do it. It was just seemed like a huge feat that I felt like I could just what knowing how I can train and organize my time and pay attention and it's running, it seemed easy, but then it's so much more than that. So once I like reading more into their stories, I was like, oh gosh, yeah. And not just Kenya, is it in different parts of Africa? I'm guessing it's
Hmm.
like in different tribes and stuff. It's so the community out there is so strong and so huge. And like where
Yeah.
it's known, like they got their certain landmarks and stuff. Where, oh, you going up there? Yeah, I'm starting training up there now. And that's the
Hmm.
whole, you wouldn't know about it until I imagine someone like you got into, just really dig deep and just immersed yourself into that. Like, that's crazy to me. And I imagine it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of other places like that in the world.
Yeah, yeah, it is very unique. Running and distance running in particular is really revered in East Africa and Kenya and Ethiopia, particularly in much the same way I would say like American football or
Mm.
soccer is revered in our country. So runners are really put on a pedestal and they're really lifted up by their community. And there are lots of resources to support distance runners. So it's just something we don't think about often here because running is just not really thought of in quite the same way. So
Yeah.
interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, it is. And it's for them, it's almost like a way, it's like a way up. It's a way out,
Hmm.
it's a way up, it's a way to persevere, to help your family where, and to just to help give yourself a better chance. And I think, yeah, there's so many cultural comparisons, like where I like how you pointed out so many different things. That was part of their struggle. Like running is seen so different here. And something you pointed out was like, oh, their relationship. I know Elvin, she was like culture shock just with her teammates' relationships with food. It
Hmm.
was like
Yeah.
she was like, "Oh, I don't get this here." Like she was indulging and enjoying herself, and where her teammates were like, total opposite. They were like, "Oh, I gotta watch this because and I thought that was so interesting, and I'm so glad you brought that up. That I imagine that was like, how could you not? How could you not do it?
Right.
Yeah, we're running it. I think at one point I wanted, yeah, because I hear like runners of, okay, there's different diets out there. Obviously, carbs are going to help you with your performance. Like, there's no way around it, right? It's going to give you the energy to make performance. But there are more people who do what is keto, where you train your body to deplete your fat stores, things like that. So I imagine all those different types of eating habits. I think one time I was like, okay, let's see if I can. When I was training, I was like, okay, maybe I'll start a run before breakfast and I'll eat like right afterwards. And I could tell definitely like my morning run versus like an afternoon run where have had at least one meal,
Mhm.
and if or versus an evening run where it's not within an hour of me waking up, and it's not necessarily I'm not starving, but I'll be ready for food after my run, things like that.
Mhm.
I remember doing different types of habits and trying out different things, and how it's, yeah, like it depends on what you want out of your body, what you want out of performance. I'm like, yeah, if I don't care about my time, then maybe I'll ease up on the carbs. But if I do care about my time, then I can't afford to like deprive myself of certain nutrients or certain parts. And so I explore that a little bit because I don't know. It's been like 6 years since I did the marathon, and I'm like, I got two boys, and I'm like, it's such a commitment, and I think my knees and my hips wouldn't like that very much if I ever tried doing any. I'll do 5Ks and stuff, and my 6-year-old, he's run a couple with me, and he's trying to have a positive outlook on it. So I want to explore that, like with the relationship with food and how that whole, not like a tangent, but that whole portion of their journey and your journey, like of discovering how to piece these stories together
Mhm.
and just how to tell the story. I want to explore that part of it. I'm at it. Yeah, like I said, like how could you not cover that?
Yeah. I thought this part was really interesting, and it helped me also be able to bring in another athlete who had been in and who was in the world class athlete program, who was in modern pentathlon, born and raised in the United States, and her name is Sammy Schultz. And she had this very traditional upbringing in the United States, and she was in sports and cross country, and her dad was a hunter. And so she was raised in the quote unquote traditional American system. And so I was able to explore the journey she had as a female athlete and then into the Army. She, again, also served as a soldier athlete against that experience that Elvin had coming from Kenya. So Elvin comes from Kenya and gets into the American collegiate system and starts to see all sorts of weird, disordered eating stuff that is very much normalized, oftentimes in American college athletics. Awful that it is, but that is the reality. And Elvin just has no idea even what she's looking at, because to be able to feed her family in Kenya, that in and of itself was very difficult. Disordered eating and bulimia and anorexia, she just didn't even really know what that was. She was just coming to America and was just totally happy to have abundance in terms of food and nutrition all around her. So to see the restriction that her teammates were doing was so odd for her. And that was very much an experience that Sammy Schultz also had. So I wanted to show that contrast between their experiences and help the reader understand how that plays into different cultural narratives. I thought that was really interesting to do.
It was because it made it look like, yeah, obviously we can recognize it, but poor Elvin, she's just like, why are you all doing this? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it allows readers, like American readers anyway, to see it through the
Mhm.
like the outsider's point of view, where she was just like, Elvin, she grew, yeah, like you said, like she grew up where there wasn't an abundance and it
Mhm.
was difficult. It was like a little bit of food insecurity, or just wasn't the variety wasn't there. It was
Mhm.
very, I think, yeah, you even shared some of the normal diet of Kenyans, Kenyan
Yeah.
people who aren't on. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
which I imagine was cool in and of itself. Is like, wait, they're strange to us, strange looking food, there are strange sounding food, but it's, oh, look at this as a root vegetable kind of thing, or look at it as a legume. Like, what would you do?
Mhm.
And I thought that
Mhm.
thing was like, where, yeah, absolutely. We recognize that poor Alvin is like, why are you doing this to yourself? And that kind of allowed her to be like a little naive about it and to really also help her teammates understand too, because she's like asking the questions that probably they're not used to being asked. Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
she
why are
most
you doing
definitely did. Yeah, like, why are
this?
you doing this? You need to fuel your body to be able to race at the level that we're about to race at. So why am I eating pizza and pasta and hamburgers and feeling great, but you're only eating salads? and your mental like she was able to see that their mental health was breaking down, their bodies were breaking down, and to her it was very clear like what the issue was, and they just had these blinders on. They couldn't necessarily see it because they had been buried in these systems as young girls and young women for so long in a society where we have billboards everywhere with skinny people wearing bikinis. That's what they've aspired to, but that's not at all the messaging that Elvin had grown up with. And in fact, it was the opposite. Women who had weight on them were seen as having lots of money.
Right.
And so it was just a totally different mind frame. And so bringing those two cultures together, it was educational for both of them. So I loved high.
Yeah, and Sammy, she when we get into her stories, poor woman, poor girl, she just had
Mm-hmm.
okay, I didn't realize what pentathlon. I'm like looking at,
Mm-hmm.
is that maybe pronouncing it correctly? I'm like, what
Yes.
that? Yeah, more or less, yeah, pentathlon, where it's 5 sports, and even Ellen was like,
Mm-hmm.
how does she do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. And the poor girl, just to have the bar set so high and such high expectations for herself, but not for not like one sport, but five. That's crazy to me. That is crazy
Yeah.
to me. I didn't even know that there are people who do it and who excel at it, who do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then for her to see that, I say it also broke my heart because then you got into the damage she was doing to her body and that
Mm-hmm.
she had been doing to her body for years, where she just didn't have the right resources, or she didn't know what to ask for. It seemed like she was just
Right.
focused on being the best and being the best that she could. But then years later, after years of doing it, it's like she doesn't find out until she needs her body to do other things. And then
Mm-hmm. Right.
it seemed like really stressful at that point because I imagine, oh, I'm gonna go all over the place, but so I imagine like you still have relationships with these athletes, and
Yeah.
yeah. So how long ago did you start chatting with them?
It was about 3 years ago when I
Okay.
started my project. Yeah. Yeah. And we're still all very close today.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, because then you bounced around to like their homes and like you went to
I did.
Kenya and
I
all that.
did.
And what was like
Yeah.
maybe one of the more fascinating or surprising experiences from you just hopping around and really getting like a first look at what bringing this project together?
I think for me, it was very pivotal for me to spend time in Kenya, in the villages in which Shadrach and Elvin grew up, to be able to understand the journey that they had taken and how profoundly intense it must have been as a young person. So to be there in those spaces really helped me be able to capture that in the narrative and to be able to write about those places and the smells and the sounds and the dusty roads and the fields that they walked through, the ability to describe that to the reader and then take the reader from those villages all the way to a cross country course in the United States with 3,000 people and you're lining up. And then 2 years later, you're standing on the line at the Olympics. Like just the trajectory of that journey in the period of time in which they took it was pretty fascinating. So that was probably the most profound experience I had while I was writing this, to be able to actually be in those villages.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine it made it a little bit easier, yeah, like you said, to just get those sensory experiences across and to really
Mm-hmm.
get that environment, get the big picture, and do your best to just get readers into the mindset that like this is where we are, this is what the sounds are, the smells are maybe, and yeah, I think that's so cool. 'Cause I imagine because you went all the way back from before, like with their at least with the couple from Kenya, you
Mm-hmm.
started their journey before, like when they started discovering running. And then
Yeah.
so I'm guessing is like for you, sorry, I can't remember like the whole timeline of because I know by the time the book is finished, where we're all watching Alvin and God, I keep from forgetting it, Shadrach,
Shadrach. Yeah.
Amy wobbling along, like a little
Yeah.
symbolism taking his first steps. So I imagine
Yeah.
how long ago was that? That was 3 years ago when you were started and that well, I don't know. How long did the whole from concept to completion
Yeah. That's a good question.
take?
So that whole process was about 3 years from
Okay.
start to begin or start to end. And so the book concluded with their son, who was about 1 year old at the time, and now he's about two.
Okay.
So that's the
Okay.
timeline there. Yeah.
Okay. The
But
house
I
party
began
scandal.
talking
Yeah,
Yeah, I began talking to them when they didn't have a baby. She wasn't even pregnant. And
sure.
then just a few months after we began talking and I was interviewing them, she told me she was pregnant. And so that was fascinating because then I was able to integrate that whole pregnancy and kind of
Yeah.
that postpartum return to sport, which
Like
is fraught in and of itself for women, especially women at that level, especially women in the military, like all of it. She's got a lot of things working against her. She's also a woman of color. She's just had uphill battles her whole life.
yeah. Yeah, that is fascinating because it is. And I really like the research that you also incorporated into that. I imagine it was tricky to figure out what format you were going to tell the
Mhm.
story and how you're going to integrate these important tidbits, like both with the whole, not just with the eating and the
Mhm.
contrast in the food with relationship with food, but also with how vastly different or maybe lack thereof, like research in women's sports,
Yeah.
there's just a disparity with male athletes because I like how there's I feel for the sport performance world, there'd be like a little treasure trove there. Like you
Mhm.
can have the keys to the kingdom if you paid attention. Like you can help women overcome and be able to like I don't know if compartmentalize is maybe a healthy word for it, but find an issue and they learn to address it. They learn to identify it, to address it, and then so that allows them to maybe stick that in their back pocket somewhere so they can focus on however their process is, so they could focus on their performance versus, oh my, being too stuck in their head or figuring, because
Yeah.
like emotions, it's hormones, it's like women, our bodies go through a cycle, literally. It's like we're different from
Yeah.
week one than we are in week four. And
Mhm.
even with me, I'm not an athlete. I did the marathon a couple times, but I'm like, I still run because I feel like I love it. And I feel like it's a good, like, way to just keep good exercise. But it's also, I like that I'm not like performing anymore. I'm like, if there's no pressure, I
Yeah.
just go out there. If I walk for a few minutes, it's okay. So I'm
Yeah.
like, and I'm thinking, like, I
Good.
even identify it to my husband. I'm like, joking aside, it's, you know what? Yeah, I could tell that something, I think I'm transitioning from week 2 to week 3 right now. That's
Good.
like, just like, joking aside, grossness aside, I'm just like, no, you know what? I'm like, I gotta wait. I gotta track. I gotta wait. Which
Uh-huh.
is it? But it's legit. It's like your body's getting over your ovulation versus leading up to being on your period, and then from the week after the recovery. And there's maybe 9 days where we're like, we feel right as rain, where we're on top of everything, and
Yeah.
conquer the world. But then it's something shifting again because our body is just what we do,
Yep.
and there's not a whole lot of control. So I think that's so important that you integrated that and that you touched on the lack of research and the lack of resources and the lack of sports medicine scientists, like, and acknowledging the vast difference to like the male and the female body is, and how certain, not just like hormones, but the certain treatments and stuff, their bodies are going to respond in different ways. Their bodies are going to heal in different ways. And
Mhm.
it's surprising to me that as big as this community is, the running community and even like the military community too, there's little pockets of that. It's still surprising to me that we're, at least like you could correct me in this, that we're barely hitting the surface.
No,
Those
I think that's true.
those distinctions.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many decades that running has been a sport or just sports in general.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just thought that was so fascinating. I really appreciated how you made sure to point that out, and you just had clear example with both of your female subject matter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an area that I'm really fascinated by as a runner. And while I was writing, there were a number of books that started to come out that sort of talked about this. So there's more and more discussion around this. But I think it's just, yeah, I think it's really important because the reality is 95%, it's something ridiculous, like 95% of sports science up until now has been focused on the male body. And that's primarily because researchers consider that females are too difficult to study because we have these hormonal shifts. But also, we're half the population. I'm sorry, researchers, but you need to put in the effort to be able to study
Yeah,
our bodies, to be able to give us the information we need to be able to perform in our daily life. I just think it's fascinating.
yeah, and that would seem like more of a reason.
I know.
So
Also, I
difficult. Don't you want to figure it out? It's like,
Yeah. Also, I just think it's interesting, and I think I talked a little bit about this in the book, that women fought so hard to be on an equal playing field with men through the 60s and 70s. The equal rights movement really tried to push women to the forefront and say, look, give us a platform. We are equal. And so there was this big equality movement, which was great. But the one thing people failed to recognize is, yes, we're equal, but also we're different. So
Yeah.
also we have to be trained different. And so
Yeah.
that kind of, I think, got ignored on some level, and understandably. And so I think now finally people are taking a step back and saying, okay, there's a better way to do this for women.
Yeah, 100%. I know. Okay, how much of the people who respond to that are like gloating, "Oh, you want to be equal, blah blah blah." It's yeah, okay. Like equal rights does not equate to like equal. It doesn't transfer to physiological. It's just no. We want to be like the same. We want to be compared in the same standard to our male counterparts for a job, like a career or an educational track or compatibility for things or like our capabilities to do like anything, like even if it's not to earn money, it's like treat it, just really view us as a capable person without the male or the female in front of it versus
Mm-hmm.
like physiological. Yeah, there's a reason why women's performances in a certain sport are going to be that average is going to be different than men's performance in a specific sport.
Mm-hmm.
There are reasons to that. It's like we're not talking about it's. I think I like watched a video of Priyanka Chopra, who was just basically just so basic. Why do I have to explain this to you? Yes, don't tell me that I can't be a CEO if I'm a mom. That's the difference. Yeah, physiologically, like we are different. But you never ask a man how are you going to be a parent and head of your company. That's the
Right.
whole thing.
Right.
And it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot of to be said about the upcoming generations that are like
Mm-hmm.
slowly but surely we're yeah, like you said, we're approaching that. We're getting to that with all the work done decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're hopefully seeing not the pendulum, but seeing that cycle play out. Okay, how
I hope
to
so.
respond to this? Do we have to keep fighting? We have to keep that wheel going. We don't want it to stop. We don't want to go back. And there are people who are gonna keep putting them trying to put the brakes on us in different ways. And it's
Sure.
just with legislation coming out. I don't know. It's all yeah, it's also silly. So I think yeah, like I just I thought that was such an important way to really differentiate because there is so much more to the story. Not that Shadrach's story wasn't
Mm-hmm.
fascinating, but there was just so much. There's so many more like nuances to Sammy's and Alvin, which so much
Yeah,
more
I agree.
to what they were going through
Yeah.
versus the male
Yeah.
counterpart of that.
Yes.
It's I'm
Yeah.
like looking at the cover and I'm like, oh, that's because I remember when I first saw the cover, I was like, oh, that's cute, and I was like, oh, I was like, oh no, this is a serious story, and like like how crazy that they found each other because weren't they living not far from each other? And yeah,
Yes.
and
They
then they
were not
found each
living
other.
far.
Yeah, and they found each
Yeah.
other in like across the world,
Yeah.
and
It's true.
the world of running brought them together.
Yes.
And I like,
That's right.
I you know, I was like, it was such a heartwarming story because it was like, I was like, oh my god, they found each other and they were able to lean on each other through being in a foreign country, having to figure out life for themselves in a different world, and also they were able to like their experiences resonated with each other and they related to each other in terms of what was important to them, like their
Hmm.
sport, love of running, and they wanted to stay here and they wanted to keep running. And I thought that
Hmm.
was so like, what are the chances? You
Yeah,
know,
I think it is.
I don't know how often Native Kenyans come here and find love with each other. I don't know.
Probably not too often, huh?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. 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 I
Um,
loved that too. I loved that they
yeah,
actually met on a cross country field in Terre Haute, Indiana, of all places.
yes.
Yeah.
I know, like Indiana. Where you like, oh, I grew up like probably miles from you. It's, yeah, you did. Like, what are you
Hmm.
here? What are you doing? Like,
Exactly.
they were female. They found their counterpart in each other. I
Yes.
love.
Yes.
Let me see. So your background is in like sports journalism, right?
That's
I
right. Yeah.
imagine a lot of your skill transferred over to I imagine also sports journalism is what articles or doing video, like interviews, things like that. How did your skill transfer over to this sort of project? And then were there any big lessons learned? Like you have to play around with formats? Did you have to learn any new skills, things like that?
I'm trying to think. It was pretty seamless. I had studied journalism in college many years ago, like 25 years ago. And then I took a major detour, as often happens with people in life. And I was a lawyer for a bunch of years. And then I taught at the college level. And then I did the mom thing for a bunch of years. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I got back to writing. And my first book was a memoir on the adoption of our two kids. Both of our kids are adopted from China. So it was about the adoption of our kids. And then a year that my family spent with our kids, we moved back to China when they were 4 and 9 and lived with them in China for a year. And so that was my re-entry into writing. And so after I wrote that book, I got the idea for a second book, which was a sports book about a badass female. And that was published in 2020, and it was the same creative nonfiction. And I realized, okay, I've come all the way back full circle to sports journalism, which is what I had done 25 years ago, but I was just now doing it in the book format.
Okay.
So it was pretty seamless for me to go from writing this most recent book about this female mountaineer to this book. Yeah, pretty seamless to be able to do that. Yeah.
Oh, that's good then. Yeah. And then with you didn't jump right into this. I imagine with 3
Yeah.
subjects as the point of your book,
Yeah.
telling 3 stories is more challenging than one person.
Yes.
How
Yes,
did you,
for
yeah, like, how did
sure.
that go then? Like, how did you have to organize it and all that stuff?
Oh my gosh. Well, there are there were highs and lows in that process. The first book, as I said, was about myself. So I didn't really
Mhm.
have to like work too hard on that. I didn't have any scheduling stuff.
Yeah.
The stories were just like in me.
Yeah.
And then the second book I wrote was about this prolific female mountaineer, but she had passed away. I talked to family and friends, but I wasn't really dealing with her specifically.
Okay.
So that was unique. And then I came to this story and I was dealing with 3 living, breathing human beings who were with us on this earth and have their own lives going on. And there was lots of scheduling. And also their lives were changing through the process of writing this book. So I very much had to follow this journey as I was researching and talking to
Mhm.
them. And so the book ended up looking a little bit different than I thought it would when I started because they have lives. And so things changed. So that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so fascinating. 'Cause I didn't know. Yeah, I imagine so the mountaineer. I didn't know that person had passed away. So I'm such a huge difference because you're relying on her closest family and
Right.
friends too. And
Right.
then on that whole legacy is going to be obviously different than the impression that you get from that person directly. Right?
Yeah.
She,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not. Yeah, obviously I can't speak for her, but she probably was humble as all.
Yes, for sure.
Not like not really not
Yeah.
as too much, not patting herself on the back. Just she had a goal and she was just doing her thing and did what she needed to do and gathered the respect of her close family and friends and all
hmm
that. So I
hmm
imagine, yeah, you get a whole different perspective versus talking to the subjects and then following how they're still you going on with their lives. Like they're not stopping their
Yes.
lives to make sure you've got your book.
Right.
They're like,
Right.
they'll, yeah, sure, but by the way, I'm gonna be giving birth in a month. Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know different challenges, right? Because in this with this book, the 3 of them very much cared what was in the book. And so they very much had hands-on experience with the manuscript and they would correct
Okay.
things for me. And I gave them a lot of leeway to be able to help me create the story that was the life that they thought that they had, which was very time consuming, but it was important to me to do that. Originally, there were 4 people in this story,
Okay.
in addition to Sammy, Shadrach, and Elvin. And I wrote the whole book, including his thread, and I had spent all sorts of time with him. And once I gave him his thread and the story, he was like, it's too much. I can't do it. And
Oh,
so I had to unweave him and take him out of the story. So this is
wow.
what you go through when you're dealing with real people, right?
Yeah.
That was really tricky. Whereas the challenge with the other book was I was writing about somebody who had passed, but you're dealing then with people's memories. So I would talk to 30 different people who knew her, and they all had slightly different ways that they remembered her. And
Mm,
the portrait that I was painting of her was this combination of all of their memories. And a lot of them ended up reading the book and saying, that's not quite how I remember her or quite how I remember that experience. But you just do the best you can as an author to create the picture based on lots of different narratives that you get. But everybody's memory is so different, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's speaking truth to the idea of everyone throughout your life is going to have a different perspective of you as a person.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's God, how existential that process, like those questions that bring about how we're existing here and how person A and person B and person C are going to perceive the same situation, person and the same responses to a situation and the same
Yeah.
personality. Like all those three people can be recording, remembering an interaction
Hmm.
with me, the same interaction in different ways. It's
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Yeah.
I imagine that was just you're like, okay, that's something to keep in mind for like how you conduct yourself. I don't oh,
Yes.
you forgive people and how
Yeah.
your relationships in general.
Yeah. It does take a great deal of patience as an author and a certain kind of personality to be able to navigate those conversations with people where they spill their hearts to you about their memories of this person, and to take it all in, and then to be able to say to them, this is so wonderful, thank you so much, I'm going to do the best that I can with the memories that you've given me, but it's my job as an author to paint a picture that will create a legacy for this person you love, and it might not resemble exactly the memories that you have of that
Yeah.
person, but just know that I did the best that I could. So I think I
Yeah.
did that well, but it was
Yeah.
really tricky. It was really
Oh, I
tricky.
imagine, especially like to remain objective and to remain
Hmm.
factual. I can't imagine maybe you have a poster board with sticky notes of trying to
Yeah,
organize comments
I
and
did
organize common themes amongst what people would
for
say in
sure.
language. That's so fascinating. I
Yeah,
versus now where I've said it all. It's just, I don't remember telling her this. They're like, no,
yeah.
you didn't. Like you, no, well, it's not like you didn't. And
Yes.
then, or,
Yeah.
God, I felt like I could imagine how yeah, like you said, like it's a different challenge. It's a different kind of stress when you're talking with the people who are actually here. And yeah, I had no idea that you had to take one whole person out of the story because
I did.
they
I
feel it was
did.
like they just weren't ready for the like the
That's it.
vulnerability, like the
That's
authenticity of
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
I could totally understand that too. Because it can be
Yes.
like what natural organic conversation versus being in it like in print. And
Right.
oh,
Oh my gosh, my friends and
yeah.
family are going to read this. And I had this one on one conversation with Joanna, which was so wonderful and lovely.
Yeah.
But actually, now it's different thinking about 5,000 people reading the story of the argument I had with my wife. That's different. So I
Yeah.
got it. I got it, but
Yeah.
I have to say that it was frustrating because I tried to be really authentic from the very beginning about what this process was. And I put so much energy into kind of creating that narrative arc for him that it was really hard. This is what you go
Yeah.
through as an editor. It's just the process, or as a writer, this is the process of editing and facing cuts. And this was just a really, yeah, this was a big cut
A big
and
one.
a big one.
Yeah.
And at the end of this book, I will say that I've said to my husband on more than one occasion that I think I'm ready for fiction next. That will be so much easier on one level.
Yeah, yeah, like a different challenge, but yeah, then you wouldn't have to deal with okay, I have some. There's a
Check.
different number of cooks in the kitchen, different type of
Yeah,
like then yeah,
sure.
yeah, and like doing nonfiction stuff like that, especially when it's based on real people who are still living, and it's yeah, I imagine that is so tricky to just do right by them, and to when you're like sitting there like waiting for their like approval,
Mm,
for lack of better words, they're like green light,
right.
they're like okay, thank you for doing this. Wonderful, Godspeed. Go for it.
Yes.
I'm all for
Yeah.
it. Actually, I'm so like after the fact. I'm so sorry all the work that you've done, but I can't. Like
Yeah. I
that's
know.
probably not to tell you either. I can't
That
imagine.
was a hard conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for everyone. But it turned out the way it had to turn out. It was like maybe there's a little silver lining. I wonder if maybe for
Yes.
would have been a little bit too much.
I think it probably would have. And I was able to dive into these three a little more when I cut
Mm.
20,000 words. I was able to add
Oh
to their
God.
stories.
Yeah, I could tell. Don't worry. If your heart's shattered a little bit, I don't think anybody would blame you for that, for being like,
Thank
I
you.
imagine how much strength it would have taken for you to handle that
I
with
know.
grace and with like
Yes.
gratitude and
Yeah.
with
Yes.
just being like, are you kidding? People,
Yes. Yes.
oh, absolutely. But it turned, no, I'm glad that it it turned out. It
Yeah,
sounded like it turned out the way it had
I
to,
think
no
so.
matter what.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
no.
Yeah, yeah.
So you tapped into this a little bit. What were the most challenging parts to write, and then what were the most enjoyable parts to write?
Let's see. I think in terms of the most enjoyable, I loved writing the scenes with races. There were a number of scenes where they were racing either on the track or on the roads. And I loved writing those scenes because I was able to talk to them about how they felt in those moments and what it was like to have their shoes pounding pavement in different parts of the world. And I found that I could write suspense pretty well. And I loved kind of bringing the reader along for those. There was one particular chapter, and the whole chapter is focused on Shadrach's role as a pacer for Eliud Kipchoge's attempt to break the 2 hour marathon, which had never been
Yeah,
done. And to be able to write that chapter from his point of view as a pacer was really unique. Their pacers haven't really told their stories very often, certainly not
sure.
in print and not in a book. So to be able to
Yeah.
capture that was the most enjoyable, I think. And then in terms of the challenging, I think probably the stuff we've talked on, which was all of the challenges that Elvin and Sammy faced as women in high performance sports and women dealing with disordered eating. That was really hard, again, because these are real lives. And Sammy was literally going through the unraveling of her disordered eating as we were talking. And I was like writing as fast as she was emoting and
Mhm.
telling me what she was going through. So we were walking through that together. And so that was very hard to write and to capture.
Uh, yeah, where it was like almost, an unofficial like therapy kind of.
Very
I mean,
much.
yeah, I
Yeah.
imagine until you've been through. I go to therapy because I have a mental health, and everybody has mental health. I don't even care talking about it at this point. But yeah, and it could be. It takes a while, like until you find your resources and tools to like. 'Cause I remember like so longest time I had a hard time like articulating it because I'm like it's hard to like relate to somebody who just doesn't know, like their brain doesn't work that way, or
Right.
at the end of the day, it's your brain, and you just got to figure out how to find that balance to work with your brain and to equal out and to give yourself the best fighting chance. And for my husband, for one, it's hard to articulate to him like what triggered what I'm going through right now. It wasn't until after a while of talking to professionals where I was like, okay, no, now I have explanation that I feel comfortable with falling out to explain to people.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it's not,
Mm-hmm.
it's, yeah, it's the mentality. My brain it's a self-awareness too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important for what these women went through. And I think unfortunately there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they got a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of opportunity to really identify any irregularities or any
Mm-hmm.
struggles because they were just so focused on being the best, and they were like everybody around them was just focused on one thing where
Right.
it was like,
Right.
oh wait, are we going through the same negative experiences too? Is there something to that? Is it just me? Or no, we don't talk about it. We're just not gonna don't ask me why I'm eating a salad, and I don't know what happened to your snacks kind of thing. So I remember that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that was like how Alvin caught
Yeah.
her roommate or something? She was like
Yes.
noticing
Yeah.
food and like it, and I think about that. It's yeah, what even when I have the resources and the tools, it still take that extra work to get out of your own brain
Mm-hmm.
and get out of your
For
own house
sure.
and to
Huh.
really just make that shift. I think even just identifying it is,
Yeah.
yeah. I imagine with Sammy ha having her, like, describe her experience, even not in a therapeutic setting, just for your project. I imagine that helped her work it out and helped you to figure out how you were gonna work it in and picture here, how it
Yeah.
represents the bigger picture, stuff like that. And
Yes.
it
For sure.
speaks to you and how comfortable they were talking to you and the kinship,
Yeah.
the comfort that they felt with you.
Yes, I think that was very important, especially with this particular thread of the story and the disordered eating theme that Sammy and I really dove into. That ability to be able to trust me, to share the story in the way that was comfortable for her was critical. And if she hadn't trusted me, I don't think she would have shared that with me. And then there would have been this whole piece of the book that was missing. And I think this just added so much value to the narrative and also will be so helpful for people. I know that it already has been very helpful to a number of people. So that was something we
Yeah.
talked a lot about. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. That kind of like segues into my one of my questions is what do you hope readers get out of it?
Yeah, that's definitely one thing I hope they get out of it. The takeaway of what it's like to be a young female athlete going through middle school and high school, and how important it is at that age to have support systems and coaches who give you the right messaging and teach you about your bodies and what you're going through hormonally and the things that you should be doing to fuel your bodies. She didn't get any of those messages.
Yeah.
And that set her down a path that was really negative and really harmful over the long term. Even though she ended up being an Olympic athlete, she was very damaged because of all of this negativity that had been coming at her from a young age. So I think that's probably the most important part, talking about the lessons around how we can support young female athletes through high school, college, and then into the professional ranks for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, just somebody for me who like doesn't, it's not like I gravitate towards sports nonfiction, but even for someone for me who's an avid reader and reading through this, it's helped me to think back and think, just consider, yeah, like that topic that even though it doesn't directly affect me, like women in sports and their performance levels and how they're not being studied to an
Mhm.
extent that they should be. Just for someone who's, from my point of view, it gave me insight into like it raised awareness for me as someone who's not like heavily immersed in that community. So I think
Yeah,
that something like a book,
right.
even if you're not shoving it down our throats, but you know this is a serious problem. This is what
Yes.
these two athletes were going through, and this is the reality of it, type of thing.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to weave this educational piece into a narrative like this. I think it helps people with a touch point of somebody's story. So
Oh
I think
yeah,
that's a good way to do it. And it does really affect all of us. It affects me as a mother raising boys and girls to
oh
help
yeah,
them understand what is healthy messaging around food and nutrition and
yeah,
fueling. Again, whether I have a boy and a girl
yeah.
going through adolescence. So it's helping me understand how I can do better as a mother with the messaging that they're getting from their friends and their community and their teachers and their coaches.
Yeah, yeah. And I have two boys, but it's something that I want to be like, I still want to be conscious about what they hear me say about myself or out
Mm-hmm.
loud.
Yes.
So I'm like, I occasionally do some intermittent fasting, things like that. So I try to but I try to focus it on trying to be healthy and trying to watch my waistline just for like health reasons, not necessarily for like how I look. I mean, and
Good.
then also like
Yeah.
for stuff like them, what they'll see something on, I'll get those, what do they call them? Like flavored seltzers, like the zero
Mm-hmm.
calorie flavored bubbly water. And they see, oh, 0 calories, zero sugar. I'm like, yeah. And they'll ask about it. I'm like, yeah, but we get the calories. It's like your energy that you get to fuel your body, but we don't want to fuel it with junk, right? So maybe you don't want to get your calories from a can of pop, but you can look at your calories from, I don't know, like something you eat. Well, what are the graham crackers, animal crackers, things like that, fruit, vegetables. We want to get our fuel from things that aren't so sugary and things like that. This is just the kind of label that shows us so that we can have a fair look at what we're putting into our bodies. So
Yeah.
it's a challenging topic, especially
It is.
especially with girls.
Yeah.
Even with boys, I want them to be aware of it too, so that they, not just for themselves, but that so they like don't see society as a way of there's only like your body looks that way because you aren't taking care of it. It's no, it's more different than that. Just because someone is
Yes.
looks like they're very thin, it doesn't mean that they're
Yeah.
unhealthy. If someone's a
That's
little like
right.
overweight, it doesn't mean they're like unhealthy necessarily. I tell them like, you know what, I try to explain how I pay attention to how I feel after I run a mile versus like how I feel if, I don't know, I put on a pair of pants that I haven't worn in 6 months. And that's right.
Yeah.
Guys, I try to have a healthier outlook because obviously there's still those ingrained like thoughts,
Yeah.
says that's like hard to shake.
For
So
sure.
it can be tricky to, I'm thinking about maybe it's a little easier because I only have boys and there's less pressure. But I think I just also want them to be aware of, no, at the end of the day, we if you put too much junk in your body, you're gonna feel it. At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, if you don't watch how much sugar you eat too much sugar around these holidays, you're gonna get sick. You're not gonna feel well. Things like that. And hopefully the older that they get, the more opportunities there will be for them to pay attention to stuff like that. Or at least, I don't know. It's hard to say when they're teenagers. It's hard to tell. It's my brother, he would eat 2 sandwiches and he's not like overweight. He has a huge appetite. Well, they would just eat like 2 sandwiches. Like my parents would have to go, like just get extra stuff just because it will also look like a feeding a family of 5 instead of family of
Yeah.
4. It's just, so yeah, it's hard to just like, identify that and just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. I feel like it's very hard to strike that balance because you want to talk about healthy eating, but you
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it so much that you end up with kids who are like hyper focused on, oh my gosh, I'm eating too much sugar, or I can't eat this Burger King. And you don't want to demonize food. Like, go ahead and eat the Burger King. If you're a teenager, eat whatever you want. For the most part, you're growing, especially if you're
Yeah.
really active. And especially if you're a girl, you want girls to be able to fuel their bodies enough and not get into this place where they're like measuring their food and worried about
Oh
this and
yeah.
that. It's just, it can be so detrimental. Those messages are
Oh
important. And especially, I think, also for boys, because there's a chance that your boys will become partners for girls and women. And so you want
yeah.
to be partnered with somebody who has good awareness of those things too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And help identify and talk them through it, or just to, for that outsiders view it. And yeah, and it's so true. Because I remember being at a point where in college, I was like, I had a really good like exercise schedule, and I had a really good like grasp on what like foods to eat. But then, yeah, like when you mentioned Burger King, I'm like, yeah, I remember one time I had a Burger King cheeseburger, and I remember like that obsession where I worked out twice as long. Like I doubled work
Oh,
day,
no.
burger
Yeah.
for it. And it's like
Yeah.
looking back on it, it was like one cheeseburger out of
Yeah.
4 months, not gonna
No.
break your progress. Like
No.
it's
No.
so silly. Like now that I look
Yeah.
now, it's I don't know, I'm like 15 years later. I think it's just metabolism. It's half the battle anyway.
Yes. Yes,
It's
exactly.
like when you get older, you can't get away with having a cheeseburger if you want, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
everybody's relationship with food and like how they respond to food. And yeah, I
it
think
is.
that's a long roundabout way to go about saying, yes, I appreciated your input on
Right.
that. You paying attention to that.
Great.
I
Good.
appreciate the struggle that you went through to try to
Yeah.
approach that topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it turned out well. I think the message turned out well, hopefully.
And I imagine
Yeah.
like how tricky it was for you to keep track of all of your sources,
Yes.
food and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really tricky,
Yeah.
like keeping track of everything and
Yeah.
that you're covering
Yeah.
all your bases. Yeah.
Yes. There's a good old big bibliography at the back of the book with all my
Yeah.
sources. So, yeah.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. So what advice do you have for like aspiring sports journalists?
Ooh. Ooh, that's a good one. I would say, and are you talking specifically about sports journalists who want to write a book or just in general what my advice would be?
How about a sports journalist maybe who's trying to write a book? Yeah.
Okay. It's probably the same advice I'd give to anybody who aspires to write a book, and that is find something that you're super passionate about because you are going to be spending probably years with this topic. And so it can't just be something that's a flash in the pan. You really have to be passionate about the people that you're going to be interacting with and about the source material of which you're writing because you're going to dive in so deep. And hopefully, the goal is for you to just love it every minute because that love of what you're writing about comes across in your writing, I think. So that's probably my
Oh,
biggest piece of
100%.
advice. Yeah.
That's good. That's 100% true. Like I said, I could tell that you had a little fun with certain parts,
Mm-hmm.
like with bringing back to talking about Tyreek being a pacer. I
Yeah.
think that was one of the more fun parts to read, just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he. I didn't realize there's like I said, there's so many little parts of this community that like because he was excited. Right? He
Sure.
was so
Yeah.
excited to be a part of it, and there was,
Yeah.
like, what, 12 pieces total?
Oh gosh. At any given time, I think there were seven, but I think in total there were like 25, and they did these kind of
Okay,
crazy
they had a thing in
rotations.
and out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh,
It's incredible. That last scene, I don't know if you remember, Megan, that last scene where Elliot pulls away and he does break the 2 hour barrier, and Shadrach's part of that pacing group, and he's behind Elliot and he's clapping and everybody's crying. And it's just this historic moment. If you just Google that moment on YouTube, you can watch that last 3 minutes and it just gives me chills every time.
oh,
So,
wow. Okay, I'll
yeah,
do that after we're
have to
done.
do that.
Oh, think
Yeah.
I just remember how fun and it was, like, it was just the fun energy of everyone being so excited to not
Hmm.
be a part of it, but for it to be done. Like, he's gonna do it. He's gonna break this
Yeah.
crazy human feat.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
I'm like, like I said, like, I'm not like marathon runner, like distance running. I don't even care about my time. I just go at a pace where I can keep going. And I finished like in about 6 hours, but I didn't even care how it was. My cousins are like, "Oh my god, doing anything for 6 hours is like horrible." And I'm like, "Yeah, it does sound daunting, but I don't know. It was just I don't know how I did it either, but it was like it was just I think it just got to a point where once I was like finished, I was like, I don't care that it took me so long. I was just like, no, I fucking crossed
Yes,
the
you
finish
did it.
line. I
Yeah.
finished. I crossed that line, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna be paying for it for a couple days. But that's one thing. Like, I did it. I worked up
Yeah.
to it. I did it, and I'm done. And
So
that was my point. I wanted to cross this line. I want to do it. And the second time around, I remember though, I was struggling a little bit because it was after I gave birth to my son,
oh
and
my
so
gosh.
yeah, so it was like once was before giving birth, and one was like actually I got chosen to do the lottery. I threw the lottery, and then I had to postpone my entry because I was pregnant. So it's like, no,
Oh,
I was like, can
okay.
I just not? I was like, can I like forfeit? Can I post? What are my options here? They're like, well, we can postpone your entry for 1 year. And
Good.
okay,
Good.
yeah, so that was fine, but it was just like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this again. I gotta start training.
Oh,
And but yeah, I just
that's
remember
amazing.
that. I remember that even the second time around, I was just, my pace was so slow. I was just like, I could feel it dragging, and I was like, no, if I start walking, I'm never gonna be able to pick it back up again. So I was just like slowing down, isn't stopping. So I found a way to
Good.
do it. And even though Chicago, I think, is like the flattest
It's
marathon
pretty
course.
flat, but it still hurts at
Yeah.
the end. There's that little upsy at the end.
Oh
Yeah.
God. Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
cruel that they put that there right
It's
before.
cruel. Yeah. It's cruel.
I just remember, yeah, they're in that last term. I was just like, okay, I'm almost there. Just look at, I think a lot of people look at the end, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my god,
Uh,
just like, okay, wait, where's my phone? Oh, it's in my hand. I was like trying to get like back with the world. Where's my husband? Like, where are my
right.
people? And just
Oh my
trying
gosh.
to, yeah, yeah. So
Um,
I was like, no, it's good. I feel good about myself doing it, but yeah, like I said, it's just such a commitment, and it's so crazy.
mhm,
And I just thought that was amazing. That yeah, like going off that part, like how that whole community, everyone was excited and behind this one person,
mhm.
like
Yeah.
crazy feat be
Yeah.
accomplished, like that
Yeah.
barrier. I thought that was so cool. I thought that was
I
so
love that.
fun.
I love that
Yeah,
chapter. Yeah.
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 Okay, so what's next for you? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
I'm hoping that the next thing on my plate will be a movie. My second book is being made into a movie. So I'm hoping that I will
Nice.
be working on a movie next. I don't have a next book picked out yet because I'm hoping again that I'll be doing some stuff in Hollywood. We will see. We
Yeah,
cross fingers for that. Yeah.
about the mountaineer woman?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that could be really fun. Not like a documentary, right? Like a
Scripted. Yeah. With
yeah,
actors and
yeah.
actresses. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that'll be cool. Yeah. That'd be
Stay
interesting
tuned.
what they could do with that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
I'll cross my fingers for you. I am sure
Thank
it's
you.
definitely a story that needs to be
It
it's an
is.
opportunity for a different medium, right?
Yeah,
For the big screen.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I look forward to that.
So Joanna Garton, where can we find you online in our social media?
Let's see. My website is johannagarton.com and it's JohannaGarton.com. And I'm mostly on Instagram. Johanna Garton Books is my handle.
Okay, so Joanna Garton, All in Stride, that is available now. Recommend it for people who are into sports journalism, people who are in the running community, and anybody really who's just like looking for something a little bit different in their nonfiction.
Yeah.
That's what they like. If that's what they like to go for, I definitely recommend this one for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah, like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to read this book and to talk about it and get a little just all that juicy insight into
Yeah,
the crazy world of running. I totally appreciate it. And yeah, if you're ever working on anything else wise, feel free to come back. Love.
I shall. I will come back and chat with you again.
And there you go. That was Johanna Garden talking about All in Stride. That book is available now. Go ahead and check out the show notes for links where you can purchase the book and find her online and on social media. And while you're perusing online and on social media, do give Cantina Book Club a visit and a like and a follow, all that good stuff. It'll help me out. Go leave book reviews or ratings at least on Amazon and Goodreads if you can. It helps the authors out. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.